All right, so updating from what I did yesterday, where I figured out how to cram in two TXIDs and make something that depends on the revelation of the earlier trade in order to settle the payment because I don't have enough bytes. If I had 10 more bytes, I could put it in. And of course, if I did this with an ordinal, I could go up to 500 kilobytes. I could put in GIFs, right? I could put in a little movie clip. Or people are doing this with the ordinal NFTs. But I'm trying to be elegant here. I'm not trying to spend a lot of money on fees to make this layer two work. So actually, even though it's annoying to have to deal with this byte limbo, it is ultimately for the best. The conservatives are trying to conserve block space so that it's easy to run a full node, even if the average person in the future relies on ZK proofs. They run partial nodes. Somebody has to run a full node, and it might as well bloat more slowly. So I'm down with it. Okay, I accept the challenge. And ooh, man, it's tough. So, TXIDs are not fully encoding data. They're only encoding a reference to the transaction data. The raw transaction hex is long. It's like maybe it depends if you have multi-sigs, it bloats, it gets bigger, right? That's why we have things like segregated witness, so that we can keep those tighter and then refer to the witness for additional um, transaction signatures. In the vanilla form, they take about 100 bytes each, right? So it's a one-way deal hashing. It allows you to look things up, but they have to actually go into the database of the blockchain. So if you're doing a layer two and you can only refer to TXIDs and you don't have additional data to fit in to your unpublished closed settlement, it's tricky, right? So then the other thing is these trades, if my counterparty is abusive, even if they're a market maker with a great reputation, maybe in a time of extreme volatility, they lean on the fact that they're the second signer. So if there's an expiry block in 5 to 7 minutes in a time of extreme volatility, that's actually something a market maker could really abuse. And even if they only abuse it for half a second to a second, or maybe an extra, maybe 2 seconds, when you've got the tape swinging around $100 in that time period, that does make a big difference. So we have to have some kind of limit, right? It can't just be an unlimited free option that they can abuse, where you don't like what's going on, you publish a withdrawal, and they have 7 blocks, and then that would be the 7 block window default expiry block. But maybe you use a smaller number of expiry blocks to make that a more efficient option, right? So this is more or less the necessary parameter in the protocol. And you might say, well, why not just make the withdrawal window like 3 blocks? Well, we're talking about Litecoin, the block time is lower. Sometimes you'll get like double blocks. You need at least 1 block of anticipation for a watcher. So I settled on 7. And then likewise, you wouldn't want to pick an expiry block that's just 2 blocks away because it might take you by surprise. So then we have a settlement transaction where close is not true or close is false. And you're only referencing one TXID there. And this has the benefit of you publish this late after the expiry, so it would be invalid. And then you publish this, referring back to it, and it's going to actually be kept alive. It's going to invalidate it. It's going to revalidate it. And because close is false, the trade is still going to be open. And this is just going to settle to the mark price that is agreed on in the settlement. So this is a way to fully transition from having an expiry block and you could publish it right away. That's our default product that we're putting out. But to really engage with L2, you sign the unpublished keep alive settlement. So now you've got this insurance. You don't need to worry about expiration. And then what close being true accomplishes and referencing this other transaction, TX2 inside TX3, is it neutralizes that. So there's some redundant logic where if this did get published, then you end up with this guy um, settling you for the increment that hasn't already been settled. Um, and if this was a price that swung the other way, then that all that math gets taken into account. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but don't worry, the ending is gonna be real sweet. Um, and so what this accomplishes is it allows the protocol to infer what is the equal and opposite trade and book it out. And you end up in a situation where you are doing at least two trades. And in this model, so so the other twist with working with Bitcoin is you have these Merkle tree monies, these UTXOs, and this is why Lightning Network is like insane. Like they have channel factories and virtual channels and all this stuff, and you can have a transaction fail. Oh, we need to open a new channel real quick in order to route this, and there's a lot of capital redundancy, and it's all trying to respect the nature of UTXOs as this kind of rigid money. And they're cool because they're efficient in terms of the data structure, as opposed to something like Ethereum, where an archival node is super bloated and then indexing it so you can do database queries on like what smart contract was putting in and out different tokens. That's actually, it's like a really hard problem. So the UTXO set sort of indexes itself. Each Merkle tree is its own index of the path of money flow. And if you're familiar with like mixers and things like that, the way that privacy in Bitcoin, vanilla Bitcoin privacy is defeated is by taking advantage of it. So there's trade-offs, right? Is efficient in some ways, it's inefficient in others. So here, two counterparties, this is in our vanilla wallet as we launch. They both create a transaction to fund a wallet, and they don't have to do this. They can refer to this multi-sig address in the op return of those transactions. But for the purpose of having fees and things to build subsequent transactions with, it's generally good practice that they each submit a dust output. It's about 5,600 Satoshis. It might be less now, but I go with these older versions so that you can recycle them and you can spend the minimum fee. And the minimum fee on Litecoin, I think it's down to, it might be 1,000 Satoshis per transaction per kilobyte. So if these are like 200 and some byte transactions, then it's a good amount. So if I'm wrong and the dust on Litecoin is actually 560 Satoshis like it is on Bitcoin, because those Satoshis are worth a lot more USD at this time, right? So Bitcoin is 68,000 today and Litecoin is around $72. It's a pretty big difference. But yeah, basically whatever you're plugging to this address, there you go. You have perhaps equal amounts of UTXO money, whether it's Bitcoin or Litecoin or Doge, to spend on fees and to recycle, right? And this gives us a constraint because you can only create this kiting scheme of unpublished L2 transactions with either A or B and possibly their ancestors. And if you're gonna try to go back and use B, even though you've got this chain, you get into a situation where somebody can double spend that UTXO and essentially undercut their commitment. And that goes against the whole point of like getting finality by co-signing. So I know this sounds complicated. Believe me, it's it's complicated to develop DeFi on Bitcoin. But it does create kind of a fun puzzle. So I've got two situations. One is the contingent logic of chains of UTXOs, right? So if I build the trade with UTXO A, then I know what my unpublished trade looks like. I can see what the TXID would be, even though I haven't published it. I can do that hashing function, which is done by the RPC when you do the send raw transaction RPC, but you can just do it in like JavaScript, right? It's just a SHA-256 double hash with a little endian twist. So you can look that up on Stag Exchange, ChatGPT can generate, it's just how it's done. So you generate the TXID and then you build your next transaction as the child of UTXOA. So it's UTXOA2, let's call it. So that would be keep alive, and then even though it's a little inefficient, the idea is these are your receipts for a lawsuit if you need to go to the chain and prosecute the lawsuit in the protocol logic and have your way. So I'm thinking, okay, the close settlement likewise is a descendant of UTXOA. So then the transaction that refers just to to TX3, which already includes TX1 and 2, okay? So there's this recursiveness, like we're working with limited space to put these base 256 encoded TXIDs into the operturn. It's quite a challenge. But due to the principle of recursion, the fact that you could refer to them in a contested channel close, an unfriendly channel close, is enough. And this is the logic behind TX4. And what this effectively means is that instead of publishing the trade and then the thing to keep it alive and then the thing to close it, you just publish one transaction, you get two trades for the price of one. And the protocol can even extract the fee twice out of that. So it's like I like that. It burns more tokens and whatnot. So you might say, well, that's kind of cool. You can book the trades quickly. You can do this shimmy to get around the free option problem and the risk of expiring, and then you can end up just having a single trade, a single transaction that I pay you or you pay me, depending on who won the trade. And it's two trades for the price of one. That's a 50% efficiency gain. As far as L2s go, that ain't bad. And then I'm puzzling out, well, okay, so if I do another series, I open them not at the price where we closed, some other price. I do it, 20 minutes later with you. And this time I'm going short. It's gonna be a completely different trade. I was long before, right? I'm like gambling. I'm day trading. I'm just flipping long and short. I'm like waiting. Ooh, I'm gonna click, 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 right? And that's what I'm trying to create here. I want this all to have the solidity of Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin at the bottom, but the user experience was just click, 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 like Boomhauer going at it, right? I'll tell you what, man, just click, click, click. And so I'm puzzling out, okay, how do I manage these UTXOs? And I was thinking like, is there a twist for this next series? Should I use UTXOB to make this one? And ultimately I decided no, because the point of these contingent chains is that these are your papers to go to court. And this is why you don't go to court. It's because you pay the other guy and everyone walks away, right? So how can I make these chains work? And I couldn't figure out a way to do it through the recursion because there's just not enough space. So if I was gonna, and this guy referred to this guy and to this guy, then I wouldn't have enough space to put in any data about the settlement for this second series of trades. So ultimately, in this model, you just do a series of four unpublished trades. You publish one, it's worth an open and a close, and then you recycle the UTXOs, and you don't have to. You can publish them whenever, so you can wait for fees to get lower. I mean, there's cool things about it. You get that 50% boost, and if you wait for fees to get cheap, then maybe you're saving 70% on fees relative to like when the chain is full and the fees are spiking, right? But, I wanted to do better. I wanted to have something where you can just trade all day and then you make one trade. And what sucks about this for me is that in this version, I can't know at the protocol level how much size, how many trades, etc. were done. So I don't know how much fee to take out. So I'm gonna just calculate the fee based on um, basically the amount of money that changes hands. Probably take out. um, like half a basis point out of the amount of money that settles instead of the notional. Might be a bigger amount of basis points. I don't know. I got to think about that, but that's whatever. That's just me collecting rent at the end of the day. So try to figure out something fair for that. Um, but I figured out a way to let you do a series of these L2 transactions of an unlimited, these sets of four, and you can do four modulo n, where n can be whatever. And you can do hundreds of trades. You can do thousands of trades. And then you just publish one transaction. And that transaction doesn't even reference any TXIDs. Instead, it says, I'm going to pay you this, or you're going to pay me this. And property ID, whatever, amount, whatever. And we're going to neutralize all the trades that were made between block A and block N. Okay. And then it's like, well, how do we know what block it was? These weren't published, right? That's how time is measured in Bitcoin. It's measured in blocks, right? But you're trying to avoid publishing because it's expensive and all this stuff. So what do? We rely on the expiry block, right? So what was an inconvenience to get around the free option problem becomes a referent that if you were to actually publish these trades, they would be preempted by block start and block end parameters in this GigaChad macro settlement trade. Plus, everyone would pay more miner fees and they would pay more protocol fees, and it would be a pain in the butt. And when I thought of this, I had to laugh. I was like Walter White when he realizes that Skyler paid Ted. Because I didn't think of that, I was thinking like, okay, we're gonna go deeper, it's more recursion. No, bro, it's the stupid X-ray blocks that are just this thing that you had to do to get around the free option problem. And they actually have a double usage, which is their point of data that can be referenced post hoc, if you publish these at any point in time, after you publish this guy, making this have the finality that you want. And that means you could be co-located. You could be optimizing with with the Rust or C++ libraries for doing the signatures. And you could be booking trades on a very tight latency. You might have a matching engine on in a round robin where there's a lot of traders on the same colo setup, and you're agreeing who's going to do what trades on very tight latencies, like 10 microseconds, 50, 100, whatever. Maybe it's a little less efficient than what Bybit has, which is 10, right? 10 microseconds. But the reality of latency is there's a whole lot of time involved in like getting into the door to go through that computing. So sure, you can have an efficient C++ matching engine that's going to execute that part of the matching engine in 10 microseconds. And you can say, ooh, 10 microseconds. But really, it's like, it's longer, right? So in practice, I think it might be, 1 or 2 milliseconds, maybe 10. Um, I don't know, maybe 500 microseconds. I don't know. But something fast. And you could be trading like crazy, and you could do trades like on the Bats exchange, for the stocks. You can have real high frequency trading, and you could flip shares for, you can flip securitized token securities, or you can flip, Bitcoin derivatives for a one tick interval and do it all day long, and then you have a net settlement. And that is ridiculous. That is crazy efficient. And it means there's less revenue for the protocol, but it means there's more demand for the forms of collateral on the protocol because of the liquidity that this can facilitate. Might actually compete with what Citadel is doing on like Alpaca for US securities and US stock options. And that's what we're here for, folks. We're here to compete with Wall Street and make better infrastructure, not just to compete with each other for the same, 100,000, possibly at most, degen crypto bros, right? I mean, those guys that definitely want to come and trade and get this thing going, but it's all about doing better.